Thank you. There's no public forums. We'll move into the deputations. We have 4 deputations this morning on item 10. I'll just remind the deputations before they begin that the decision of the committee today is around whether we go out for pre-notification engagement with stakeholders, the public, prior to them deciding whether we notify a change to the district plan. So I ask David Lynch to come forward.
Thank you.
Welcome, David. You have 10 minutes. That includes time for questions and answers.
I did send through the deputation, so I hope that's been circulated. Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and sorry about the short notice of making this request. I'm making this deputation in a personal capacity. As some of you will be aware, I have made a number of deputations in the past, on the 7th of Feb last year and the 13th of June, regarding concerns we had as a family over the Council's approval of a non-notified proposal on Hagley Avenue. Development now is completed and for the most part appears to be operating as an Airbnb development. I've provided a copy of our deputation from the 13th of June for your perusal. That provides a more detailed background. I appreciate the reason I'm here today, but just, I guess, in summary, as I guess we've previously submitted, would be interested to know that when you now look at the completed development on the corner of Hagley Avenue and Morehouse Ave, as we've previously submitted, be really interested to know if this council actually believes that is the future for the city in terms of responding to residential living. You know, what you've got there is effectively modern bed sits, no parking, in our view, no sense of community. In our opinion, there's no attempt to make these type of developments livable long-term to create a viable, long-term sense of community in this city. And I think it's incumbent upon everybody in this room to probably go and have a look at that unit and satisfy yourselves one way or another whether you agree with our position. The district plan should ensure a high standard of design for all types of residential developments in the suburbs and the CBD. Clearly, there are going to be apartment developments in the suburbs and the CBD, but they should be well designed, perhaps involving the urban design panel and encouraging mixed use to not predominantly monolithic blocks of one look, 1 or 2 bedroom, one type of occupier Airbnb. However, if the City Council wishes to support non-hosted Airbnb, we respectfully submit that it must be on the basis that these type of activities are rated as commercial and not residential. Now, in response to the proposed pre-notification engagement, we applaud the Council for the decision to finally recognise and respond to the problems associated with Airbnb and related rental agencies' whole unit non-hosted home share accommodation listings in the suburban residential areas and within the CBD. We support the proposal to amend the district plan rules to address the many issues associated with Airbnb, particularly where an applicant has been granted a residential resource consent, then markets a unit very strongly to investors for non-owner hosted Airbnb. A more proactive enforcement of the current rules could and should be actioned immediately, in my view. We support the approach undertaken for the community engagement. We understand that, and we appreciate the reasons and where you want to take that. However, we question the wisdom of doing so between the 16th of January and the 17th of February for the following reasons. A time frame of just 4 weeks is not sufficient, particularly for residents groups or body corporates to meet and, if necessary, seek professional advice in preparing a formal response, and the proposed community engagement period at a time when people are still on holiday and have other priorities. We would suggest you rethink that, and our recommendation is that you aim for an engagement period of at least 8 weeks, given the significance of this, and maybe consider deferring it until March. Airbnb remit. We understand the City Council is pushing for new legislation so that councils that choose to can require all short-term accommodation providers, including Airbnb operators, to register with their local council. The purpose of the Airbnb remit is to allow local government the ability to fairly and efficiently regulate guest accommodation providers. This is something that we certainly support, and we would encourage this council that you make further representations to local government to ensure that this is actioned as a matter of some urgency. Here's something I thought you might find interesting in terms of how you assess Airbnb as a council. Having spoken to a broker just as recently as last night, he advised me if someone is operating an Airbnb that is not owner-hosted and they declare this to the insurer company, it is deemed a commercial activity. Short-term letting through Book a Batch, HomeAway, Airbnb, or any rental agency would normally require a commercial policy taken out. In the case of multiple units that are managed through a body corporate, where there is a mix of short and long-term letting, a commercial policy would be required. If the property owner has not declared that they are running an Airbnb non-owner hosted, this is considered a material fact that under the terms of the policy they must disclose, and failure to do so could result with a claim being declined. It would be interesting to know if this council has obtained an opinion from the Insurance Council, New Zealand Insurance Council, that if a property owner is operating an Airbnb in breach of the district plan, would the owner be covered by their insurance company? Finally, I draw your attention to the Jersey City Airbnb report. I have attached a copy of that, and I believe that might help staff in terms of understanding a pragmatic approach to hopefully moving into a situation where we can actually see some fairness and reasonableness from this council in response to the proliferation of Airbnb. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I was interested in your thoughts on whether we should be using the regeneration powers to act quickly, given what you've expressed in terms of coming some time ago and now coming back to us today. Do you think this, given what you're seeing in the central city, that this would be a case of using the regeneration powers to get something in place sooner rather than later?
Well, I think if anybody thinks that right now the residential response to the recovery of the city is working, is okay, in my view, you need to take urgent steps to do everything possible, because I don't believe some of these developments were what council planners anticipated. And with the greatest respect to some of these developers, they are just interpreting the rules to ensure they get the maximum outcome on the sites. Now, if that's acceptable to this council, that's fine. Certainly not to me, certainly not acceptable to many other submitters. So to answer your question, absolutely. Haste, urgency is required.
The document that we have in front of us proposes that we go out to the public for a pre-consultation. So it's to get some feedback about the different areas of the city and how they are differently impacted by Airbnb. Do you support the concept of going out for a pre-consultation? I mean, I actually take on board your comments about the length of time that's available for submissions, and I think that we will address that. But do you agree with the concept of going out for a pre-consultation in order to get feedback before staff look at the various options? I mean, you've given the Jersey option, and that's very gratefully received, but you know, Auckland's done something very similar. You know, so we are going to look at all of those options, but do you like the idea of us actually going out for a preliminary conversation first?
Look, I support that level of engagement, but with the greatest respect, the answers are actually there. We know what the challenges are, just go out and fix them. But having said that, yes, of course, if we have to go through this, if there's still some learnings...
It's not that we have to, and I'm not being argumentative, I'm just suggesting to you that in terms of a process, Airbnb has grown quite dramatically in a relatively short space of time. Our district plan has proved to be inadequate the way it is. in order to go through a Resource Management Act process, which ultimately can end up in front of the Environment Court, don't you think it's a good idea to actually have a conversation with our general public about the different impacts that Airbnb have on different parts of the city?
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand that's a perspective that you share. I personally feel that there's a lot already known around this council, but, you know, I would support that. But let's, for Pete's sake, let's make sure it's meaningful engagement. Don't stick people in a hall and have the staff tell the people. Let the people be far more engaged, and as I say, give them time.
Yeah.
And certainly it does surprise me, though, that in the report there isn't a lot of evidence that staff have necessarily looked internationally, which is something I know I referred to and others did the last time we were here. But look, that's okay. You're doing it now, and we support that. Or I support that.
Thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I'll ask Mark Jarrett to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity. I'd also like to acknowledge the chair for providing guidance to make sure that I was addressing the process, and I'd also please acknowledge, if we pass it on, Alison McLaughlin, the senior policy planner. I had a number of clarifications who responded promptly and comprehensively, explaining the council's research and some of the conclusions that they were coming to. I was really appreciative with the follow-up email and the phone call. It was excellent. So thank you very much for this deputation. This concerns agenda item number 10, which is the pre-notification engagement on home share accommodation regulatory options. I understand the matter is due to go out for public engagement, and accordingly I'm largely restricting this deputation to a matter of process. I wish to acknowledge the council and staff's recognition of the problem of whole unit unhosted home share accommodation listings in suburban, and I've added and CBD and residential and rural areas. I support this report's focused on the whole unit unhosted home share accommodation. I'm formally requesting the council, Christchurch City Council staff, Christchurch City Council direct staff to undertake engagement, including an opportunity for public comments for a period of 2 months, that's 8 weeks. This is double the time frame recommended by the council staff. In addition, I formally request the council direct staff to go out to the residents groups and meetings, as opposed to mainly relying on drop-in sessions at Turanga, library service centres, etc. I consider it unreasonable to expect the residents to formally meet, spread the word amongst their networks, organise collectively, individually, and research on planning, particularly emphasis on plans, and respond to public engagements in just 4 weeks. I'd like to remind you, councillors and council staff, that the residents will be mostly working on the engagement responses in their evenings, weekends, as most will have day jobs. I note the professional organisations, associations and body corporates will probably find it more practical to have a reasonable time of 8 weeks to formally meet and respond. The body corporates, I would argue, would have an interest if one of their members operates an unhosted whole unit home share, and it would be interesting to see how the insurance will assess the whole block, whether I'll assess the whole block as commercial or confine it to one apartment, so they'll probably need professional advice. And as you know, a body corporate is a formal organisation. It can't meet quickly and formally. I should note a professional acquaintance of mine who has, through the years, fulfilled, and I quote, through the years, fulfilled his civic responsibility by responding to many numerous CC requests for formal planning submissions, and he considers 8 weeks a minimum to work through. I'm also requesting that the staff go out and visit the residents' community groups at their meetings, as it will encourage the locals to attend. I'm sure you will agree the residents group have a much more comprehensive communications network than the council. Not that there's anything wrong with the council comms team. The going out to the residents was used, as you recall, most successfully, in my experience, by the council staff after the earthquakes and the CB was cordoned off. I mean, I remember attending at least 2 meetings. It was a full house, and it was a huge turnout as the council staff came out and talked to the residents who were actively engaged. Such an approach shows the council staff as being determined to seek community input, and I consider it also demonstrates respect. In addition, the residents and community groups will be actively involved and motivated to ensure a successful participation. They want to make it work. In conclusion, I've just included a a study that was done on Jersey City with the key findings below, a deputation, which effectively argues from Jersey City that non-whole unit unhosted home share accommodation is dominant and is effectively a commercial operation. And interestingly, they suggested that property management companies are often involved. Anyway, councillors, thank you very much for hearing the deputation.
Thank you, Mark. Is there any questions?
Just about our current district plan, because our current district plan essentially, I mean, I haven't got this exactly right, but it essentially says that if you're outside the 4 avenues, you need a resource consent in order to build the home sharing accommodation or to utilise accommodation for home sharing in this regard. But do you think that that's an effective policy mechanism? Because it doesn't really address the problem that you seem to be talking about, which is significantly focused within the CBD.
Well, according to the staff report, the activity is primarily the CBD, and it's been some concern, I think, amongst the residents group, certainly myself, that for some reason, I think Dave Kelly in an article in the press argued that the residents in the suburbs have got more rights than the residential zone areas, the residents of CBD.
Plan, yes,
and
right.
in fact, is my understanding, the urban design panel, which the council previously was suggesting be involved, is not involved. Which, yes, I think the Central City resident defined residential areas should be protected as something special to the city. Yes.
Yeah, so the district plan itself, because as you know, I mean, there was the challenge of the district plan process, the replacement district plan process, with many of the restrictions that, the requirements that were previously in place were really dismantled by really directive of central government through the Order in Council. So would you like us to revisit some of those decisions as well? In this process?
Yes. There was, I remember, amongst the council staff, when there was review going on post-quake, there was compliments of the residents groups in their participation, because we should stress to the councillors that the residents in the Central City live and breathe operating within the city, because they're running shoulder to shoulder with commercial development and everything else that goes on in the Central City. That's part of the reason they're there. I know that now. So the residents were happy to negotiate. I remember the council staff saying that they were impressed, they were complimentary that the council was crying and throwing, and then it went through and it seems to have changed. The government stance was different from the recommendations coming through from the combined efforts. Yes.
Yeah, so you would like that?
Yes, I think it should be reviewed.
I think from the previous submission we heard that very strongly in relation to the design panel. Yes,
I think that's important. I also think at the moment I think it would be safe to say the home share accommodation that's operating is probably predominantly more effective in the Central City, and I will always point out to them that I suspect you will need to review that, because I'm assuming the council wants more owner-occupier, and I'm not detecting those owner-occupier for that mixed accommodation, mixed residential use is not happening. There's less owner-occupier. My other concern is the Central City had a number of residents who would deem to be, how do I put them, that would require, I suppose you'd classify them as lower income, etc., and they were a vital part of the character of the Central City. Well, they've been priced out of the Central City, and it's sad that they've had to move somewhere else. But they were a crucial part of that culture of the CBD.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to comment. I really appreciate the way that you always affirm staff and your interactions with them. I think that's really lovely. Thank you for that.
Well, it's easy to do if they do it.
Well, we don't often hear that, so thank you. But I also, I wanted to, you were thinking about engagement and going out to residents' associations. I mean, you'll be aware that a lot of residents' associations are made of a certain demographic. Any ideas? It's a real challenge to actually get other sectors of the community's voices heard in any issues that we have. Any thoughts about how we could, in this issue, engage with those who are perhaps of a different, younger demographic?
My experience is primarily within CBD and the Central City, and as the councils will be aware, there's a large number, Councillor McClellan will be fully aware of that, there's a large number of active Central City residents group who network furiously. I'm getting emails on a regular basis on Chester Street, just to community gatherings, etc. So there's already a lot of informal networks, etc. That by going, effectively what I'm arguing is go in partnership with the residents groups, with the organisations, to go and talk to the community, to get them in a chance for them to go back to the community to co-opt. So you're effectively co-opting them. But it's a challenge for them in some cases in the suburbs, I understand, but it's also a chance for them to go out there. I think a number of people will be interested.
Thank you. So it's about using the networks that are already existing and strengthening those.
They are, as any council will tell you, you're stunned at how good the Christchurch informal network is. It's a major influence in the city.
Right, we've got time for one last question from Jake.
My question follows on from Anne's, which is that, given there are a large number of very active, well-organised community groups in the CBD, is it your view that, and it may not be, that actually council could afford to scale back some of those drop-in sessions because we'd actually be going out and talking to the people that have a natural interest in this area anyway? Or would you like to see both?
I'd like to see both. I believe in full coverage as opposed to emphasis on one. And the other one for the drop-in centres, I'm mindful of the fact that part of the plan or the vision of the city was there would be a lot of multi-storey apartment living within the CBD. And that really hasn't happened. I mean, there's lots of debate about the size of balconies with the apartments, and that area hasn't happened within the CBD. This is outside the residential, central city residents. And I think it's important some of the drop-in centres, if the developers are interested to see what's proposed and what's there, they would have an interest. So a drop-in centre for the professionals and related professions, advising them so they could talk to council staff directly would probably be appropriate as well. They probably would be interested.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask Bob Pringle from Accommodation Sector Hospitality New Zealand Christchurch branch to come forward? Thank you, Bob.
Good morning, I'm Bob Pringle. I'm from Clapton Motels. Peter is talking from the hospitality. And I brought Aaron, who is another motel operator. I'm a motel operator. And I'm going from that point of view. I believe that we should go out to the general public earlier to do this, because I'm concerned that the council here hasn't owned up to their responsibility. We hear Airbnb, we hear Book a Batch. Do you hear Expedia, Booking.com, Orbit Travel? Because these are other platforms of people booking through. Airbnb is only one platform. We heard a lot about the central CBD in the last two speakers, and we agree with them. But we've got 4,000 people, over 4,000 people, putting people in accommodation here in Christchurch. As a commercial operator, what do? I have to have a building warrant of fitness. The council seemed fit 2 years ago to increase it 20% to $205 a year. With that, I have to have compliance. We have to have fire alarms. It doesn't matter if someone's coming into my place or coming and staying for one night, 30 nights, 60 nights or 90 nights. We still have to make them safe. The only way that we can make those people safe, we've just seen White Island. The way that we make those people safe is that we have a building warrant of fitness. We have to have people with compliance. And it's on the councillors' heads here. If we change laws that don't make our people safe in our city. I was a volunteer fireman for 27 years. You always remember the first person, it's like sex, you always remember the first and the last person you see. But I always remember those people that you put out in fires. The fire service have to know who's got shared accommodation, what they're looking for. When they turn up for a fire, that automatically comes up on their screens now, what the accommodation is, who they're looking for. And it makes it a lot easier if you've got backup. So it's very important that we look at that. We also, and this is why we have to get out to the whole people to get it, and it's a whole area that we have to look at. It's also like insurance, as the previous people say. if you have a house and run on Airbnb and don't have commercial insurance, you haven't got insurance, it's twice as expensive. Rates, we pay anywhere between, 3 and 7 times the amount. When our occupancy drops down to 30%, do we go along, knock on the council and say, hey, we're only 30%, can we just pay residential rates? These are fixed costs we've got. This is affecting our industry. You get in the middle of winter and women ring you with that they can't pay their rent. They can't pay their rates. And I have it. As a member of the public, people ring me and I always say to them, go and speak. And we have 4,000 people here, or 3,800 most probably, because most probably 200 are compliant, that aren't paying their way. Why should someone that has gone through the resource consents, done everything right, virtually kicked in the guts because someone next door decides, well, hey, I want Airbnb, and I had a case the other day, a fella come in and said, I come to Christchurch every 2 weeks, and I spend a week here. I said, oh, whereabouts do you stay? I stay in Airbnb because it costs me $50 a night for a house. We have to have a similar playing field. And I think it's quite important that we are able to do that and look forward to see that we have a limited... because also we've got another hotels and motels coming on board. We have to look after these people. These are people of our infrastructure. If we don't have this, we'll have a lot of people exit the industry. And we've had people exit the industry in the motels, walked away with nothing. So, I ask you to consider, make it public so you get all the people. And, just because it's too hard because they think Airbnb, it's not Airbnb, it's commercial accommodation we're talking. They're taking money from people. If I decided to, sell everyone a couple of bottles of beer or a bottle of wine, that's totally illegal. And no motelier does it because we're scared that if we get caught. But we have a next door neighbour, and if we go down Lincoln Road, you can see a Econo Lodge with a notice on the road, Airbnb, right next to his sign. There's a poor fella that's paying rates, paying rent, paying everything. And he's got a fella next door with a wee sign up, Airbnb. So, we have to look across and, a lot more are going outside the Airbnb. And we hear about, compliance costs and that stuff. It's $205 a year, multiplied by 4,000. That's $80,000 that the council's missing out on. That will cover our compliance costs to get everyone up to a standard. A fire doesn't happen on the 31st night or the 61st night or the 91st night. It can happen the first night. We have to have those people safe in our premises every night. And it's the council's responsibility to look after those people. Erin, do you want to say that?
Just from my point of view, as far as I'm aware, virtually all of these home share accommodation people are non-compliant in terms of council rules and city plan. A few years ago, we looked at buying a house down Papanui Road in Merivale, and we're looking at converting it to a motel, going through the full process. It was an absolute no from you guys. Outside the city plan, not happening. So I'm not quite sure why, for us, it's not okay, but for them, it's fine. In my opinion, we own a motel. Looks like we should unit title every single one. We'll get rubbish taken care of for every single one of those units. We can operate without any, of the compliance costs and things. It just doesn't make sense. Something needs to be done about it. So, just to make it even, it's not fair.
Thank you, Councillor Jensen.
Thank you for raising these concerns. I just wanted to get a sense of the urgency. Like, I've heard you talk about people going out of business. I just wanted to get a kind of sense of, if we just take a business as usual approach to changing the district plan, is that going to be in time to solve the issues that you're talking about?
Well,
should we
you'll see that my notes have been distributed to everyone. Yeah. There's graphs and that on the accommodation in Christchurch. We've distributed it. I've just talked about various points of that, and there's graphs on that. And it's having a really detrimental effect on Christchurch.
And I think I read something the other day that home share accommodation in Christchurch used to, 2 years ago, I think accounted for something like 2 or 3% of the entire commercial accommodation sector. In 2 years, it's grown to accounting for 27%. So from our perspective, it needs to happen really fast.
So leaving it to a normal discipline process, which could take up to 5 years,
Nope.
probably isn't going to
Not
solve
alright.
the issue.
Well, we have to have people safe in rooms. That's the first one. You know, it's a council's responsibility. As councillors, it's like a director of a company. You know, years ago you bet you could do anything. Now it's responsibility of councillors to make sure that people in accommodation are safe.
Thank you for the submission. Thank you both. Bob, it was actually a really powerful deputation, so I really appreciate you taking the time. Would you prefer, or would you see greater sense in a consistent centralised approach with the regulatory framework around this, or do you think it would be a better approach for local authorities to tackle it on a case-by-case basis?
It's hard to get a consensus. You know, Queenstown has taken a different tack on this, but I think, you know, we have, naturally would be the one to do if we could do it and trying to get everyone agreement, and, you know, there's a lot of people and a lot of industries that are associated have Airbnb. We haven't gone into taxes or anything like that, and how, you know, we have to run legitimate businesses, and I can see if we could take a national approach in New Zealand, like, you know, Japan virtually stamped Airbnb out because they thought, well, hey, we can't have it in Japan, and Airbnb has only just started to come back into Japan now because they thought it was unfair on their commercial accommodation that are paying the fee. So, yeah, if we can go the Japanese model, an honest suggestion we do that, but, you know, we have to have these people paying their fair share like the rest of us are. And it's how the council look, and it's the, you know, do we have a house in a street and all of a sudden 3 doors down there's an Airbnb running, and, you know, I've come back from Aussie in the middle of the night and we've dropped people off in suburbs and there's no lights, no nothing, and I say to the one night I come back with those shuttle drivers, and I said, well, we don't know. You know, I just let him out here. He says Airbnb's just like Uber taxis to us.
Thank you for your time. The last deputation is from Peter Morrison, Hospitality New Zealand, Canterbury Branch President.
Yeah, good morning, councillors. Bob's done a very good deputation, but I'm really speaking on behalf of our whole board and also more on the hotel side. As you know, we've got a lot of hotel properties in this city. And this is Amy McLennan-Minty, our New Zealand operations manager for Hospitality New Zealand. We are aware today that today's meeting is for this committee to decide on whether or not you embark on a pre-notification engagement with the public on the range of home share accommodation regulatory options available to council. We do support the suggestion from staff that the council do engage with the public further, but providing the report gives a true and accurate perception of the different regulatory parameters for peer-to-peer accommodation versus the commercial accommodation. We say this because the public comments on share economy versus traditional accommodation always mention the price differential, and in particular that peer-to-peer is considered to be cheaper. However, the public fail to appreciate that some of the reasons share economy accommodation can be priced lower is that they are not saddled with the same cost burdens that traditional accommodation providers are. The travelling public is generally in favour of a share economy accommodation, especially the younger generation. However, people who live in areas with high numbers of these properties often take issue with a high turnover of guests and associated negative effects in residential areas, such as excessive noise, reduced parking and security concerns. The general public have a lack of understanding that many peer-to-peer accommodation providers do not have to comply with, such as Goods and Services Tax 1985, the Income Tax Act 2007, the Resource Management Act 1991, local district plans, long-term plans and annual plans, the Health and Safety at Work Act 2014, the Health Act, the Building Act of 2004, and the list goes on. In regards to the Health and Safety at Work Act 2015, we as an industry body point out to our accommodation members that they must meet the stringent fire and safety regulations, as Bob has talked about. While it seems very doubtful that the majority of peer-to-peer accommodation providers comply. The September 2017 fire here in Christchurch is a good example of an Airbnb that didn't have smoke alarms installed, and as a result there could have been fatalities, and the international spotlight would again be on us for the wrong reasons, the city. The general public fail to understand that many peer-to-peer accommodation providers do not have to pay commercial rates. And two, the general public fail to understand that many peer-to-peer accommodation providers, particularly in the residential area, must apply for a resource consent as per the district plan, and are not, and this is not being monitored or enforced. The Canterbury branch of Hospitality New Zealand is very aware that peer-to-peer accommodation is here to stay. We have no issue with the odd family renting out a room, as that is part of Kiwi hospitality. We do, however, have an issue with full-time Airbnb operators engaging in the professional accommodation provision. Disruptors like Airbnb are no different to online travel agencies that Bob was referring to, the OTAs, Uber Eats, Uber or Lime scooters. Our advice to members of our industry, if you can't beat them, join them. Peer-to-peer accommodation is no different. However, if you're going to act like a business, then you must be treated like one. So that is my very small submission. I think you understand where we're coming from.
Thanks so much for that. One thing that's really clear is we've got sort of two separate issues. We've got the fact that we do have some rules in place, but they're currently not being adhered to. And that's mostly because we can't identify where a lot of these Airbnbs are through the current systems, and that one needs legislation. Is that going to solve your problems so that would still allow whole house Airbnbs potentially in areas if they got resource consent, if we could find them? Or are you okay, or would you like them gone, if you like? So are they okay to be there as long as the playing field is level, or would you like us to say no whole house stuff in residential areas because they're not likely to get consent?
No, what we're saying is that there should be a level playing field.
Yeah.
If they want to have a whole, I'm quite happy.
But just make sure it's got the fire alarms and all of those
and
other,
it pays
run it like a
commercial
business.
rates, and it pays GST, and it pays tax. I know you're not in charge of that side of it, and that's where the government should be enforcing this.
Yeah.
But it's got to be a level playing field.
Yeah.
And especially, I mean, at the moment, we spoke about this way back in March.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah.
No, you were at the meeting, and it's no, you know, I know it's been very trouble with getting government to make a national rule.
Yeah.
But I offered at that meeting that we would get all the Airbnb operators. We can find them.
Yeah.
And give them to you so they should be enforced.
Yeah. So at the moment, we've got some rules which can't be enforced. Are you and hospitalities and the association actually actively lobbying government to get the rules in place and changed so that we can do our part of that?
Yeah, and we did that, and I spoke to some of your councillors that went to the local government this year, and they put forward the
but are you directly
very much
talking to ministers and all of that kind of stuff?
Definitely, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bob, thank you very much for your service in the fire service. Very much appreciated. With regards to the two previous speakers, if we looked at it the other way around, and I think one of the speakers mentioned about that they could go out and get each of their units and properly title them and then become Airbnb and skip the whole list of requirements with regards to council requirements and safety, etc., which is absolute paramount. I mean, what would the effect be? Because it seems that those that are working in the industry and are conscious of their responsibilities are being hamstrung by
in a sense, what we're allowing to happen at the moment.
Yeah, and that is, I go back to this level playing field. And if people wanted to do that, you can imagine, you know, it only take one fire, like there was in 2017, that didn't happen. The council have more work to do because you'll be picking up separate rubbish bins instead of one big one. And it's just, it's got to, all I can say is it's got to be a level playing field. Yeah. We've got 4 more hotels that are meant to be coming in with the convention centre. You know, I wouldn't be recommending them to come in at the moment when there's $50 million of money going to Airbnb operators. $50 million in 1 year.
And a second quick question. With regards, I mean, you guys do a lot of advertising, obviously. What are your thoughts with, and we do have a very good communications team, but what are your thoughts with regards to the consultation going out in January, February?
Well, personally, and I've said this to the Mayor and other people, that we vote the councillors to make the decisions. And it's all very PC to have these meetings with the community all the time. I'd rather, this is my personal opinion, not the Hospitality Association's opinion, that you make a decision and get on with it. But knowing what happens, you know, I agree with David that that in January, it's probably the 16th of January. I think it could start at the end of January when most people are back at work.
Yeah.
But I don't, personally, again, I don't agree that it has to go for 8 weeks. If it's advertised properly, that the consultation is going, the sooner this is fixed, the better.
Yep.
So the longer it goes on, and as Yanni said, if it goes to resource committee, it could be 5 years. This is ridiculous. Yeah. We've known the problem now for 2 years. We met in March with you people, or the committee, and nothing has really happened except more reports.
Yeah.
It's urgent.
Thank you, Cheers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And do you want something?
No, it's fine.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.